accounting. This is the first time I know you are stepping into the human resourcing accounting class. And there are quite a number of things I know that we are going to really find strange. Some will find to be familiar. But all in all, I think and I wish that this class is going to change us. It's going to make us better people who can contribute immensely at our workplaces and can help the organizations we're working for to improve on their bottom line and overall performance. So human resource accounting is not a new phenomenon, neither is it a new concept as we may think, because I know we are used to very familiar HR functions, like we would talk about employee resourcing, we would know about employee engagement, we know about reward management, learning and development, and so on and so forth. But in few cases, human resource accounting has been presented to us. But by the time we get to know what it is, we will just realize that it is what we really know and what we have been interacting with on a daily basis. It is important to note that there cannot be an organization without people. There cannot be an organization without employees. Neither can we have an employee without human resources. In other words, what I mean is that human resources play a very vital role in the growth and performance of organizations. You could have everything as an organization. You could have resources, financial resources, and so many other. But if you miss on this very one, that is the human resources, then I bet you will not succeed in any attempt that you make to perform or try to achieve on some of the objectives that you have laid down. So by that I mean human resource is an intellectual capital. Just like we will talk about the various types of capital, the fixed capitals, the assets, the buildings, the furnitures, motor vehicles, and so on and so forth, which in so many cases we believe are the only important players towards the success of organizations. We tend to have forgotten or put in the periphery the role that is played by the human resources being an intellectual capital. There is no any organization that will be able to succeed without this important resource. And that is what we want to find out. We want to dig deeper into it to realize what exact contribution it can put on the table where organizations showcase the contributions they are obtaining or deriving from the various assets. So I will share with you some slides that we will talk about tonight. And this is CHRP 21. CHRP 21, that is the subject code for the human resource accounting. And myself, the presenter, I'm CHRP Eriko Pande, and I believe you are going to get the best time while we are at it, the human resource accounting. So as you can see, there is need for a result-based approach. There is the need for a result-based approach. This puts a lot of question as to whether there exists other approaches and whether there exist gaps that have been created by these approaches that we are trying so hard to bridge. We shall get to that when we get to the nitty-gritty of human resource accounting. But like I was saying before, human resource is an intellectual capital. It matters to organizations, and no any organization can actually thrive without this precious commodity. And by that, I mean, we really need to pay attention to what it is. Now, as we try to figure out how these human resources are fitting into the intellectual property, there are some thoughts that we need to figure out. As human resource practitioners, there are some thoughts that we need to figure out. And that is what I put as the modern business challenges. Business thrives in an environment which is composed both of the internal environment as well as the external environment. Now, this dual environment that we operate on as businesses, as companies, as organizations, normally pose to us some challenges. There is what we want to consider. There are very many challenges that businesses go through. There is a constant change in technology space. Remember, there's a lot of dynamism in business. Technology has come in hand, especially at a time when most of organizations have not been prepared fully to handle the impacts. And this has created big impact to some organizations which have not found themselves to be on the right side of technology. So when you talk about technology, it is one way in which businesses need to equip themselves, one way in which businesses need to reshape and model themselves so as to keep with the pace, the fast changing pace of technology. We have got growing competition. Remember, organizations, we would request that you mute upon entering the meeting. Kindly mute upon entering the meeting so that we do not have interferences from the background. Abdishakur, please unmute. I would not wish to unmute you, but let me just do so from my end. Thank you so much. So there are some challenges that businesses are going through. These are what I call the modern business challenges. We have just mentioned about technology. Technology is an evil bird. Just a minute. Abdishakur, please remain muted. Remain muted kindly. If you can hear me, please remain muted so that we don't interfere with the progress of the class. Thank you so much. Technology, I say, is an evil bird. Yes, it has got some good impacts towards the success of business. And on the other hand, it can impact negatively if not handled with a lot of care. So this is another challenge that every business tends to experience. There is also an enhancement in knowledge and skills as well as information. That again has been a challenge in the business. How do we deal with the enhancements of skills? How do we deal with the enhancements of knowledge and so on and so forth? There is constant changes in the regulations, in the environment that we operate on. So these again, amongst very many challenges that businesses go through, are some of the things that we need to give a second thought. Now, while we look at these challenges, we really need to think and try to ask ourselves, what possible solutions could we put forward that could come in handy to help us in solving the problems we are talking about? That is the constant changes in technology that perhaps we are never prepared to deal with. The growing competition. Remember, our borders have been open for trade. We have the East African Economic Bloc. We have the international blocks that Kenya, by virtue of being one of the subscribers in these economic blocks, has to oblige by some of the policies that have been set. And so we have our borders. We can easily interact with the international community, and this allows other players, other organizations that offer the same services as we do. We've got, if you are in the banking sector, for example, we have organizations that offer the same services as we do, the banking sector. If you are in the hospitality sector, we have got organizations that by virtue of these creations, the economic blocks, they have been allowed to operate freely within our borders. And so they pose a lot of competition. How do we deal with competition? How do we ensure that we control the better part of the market? How do we ensure that we have the market share, the greatest market share? That is a challenge that we have to deal with as businesses. We also talk about the constant changes in regulations. Governments come in, governments go, and governments do have constant changes in the regulations that guide the way businesses are done. This again has been a challenge to most businesses because you may find yourself not really comfortable, or you may find yourself not complying And when you fail to comply, there are normally penalties that you have to face. These are some of the challenges that we have to handle. And being an intellectual capital, we are charged and we are obligated to handle such cases and such issues that our businesses normally face. So the solution to all these problems, will really lie on the human resource practitioners. It largely depends on us as the human resources, because remember, we have been regarded as the most important resource in an organization. So wherever there are challenges that organizations are going through, it is not the physical capital that will come in handy to solve these problems. It is not the other sources of capital that we might think of, but it is the duty of the human resource practitioner. So we must all come together to provide this solution by changing our strategy, by changing our way of doing things, by having a paradigm shift on the way we do things. And that calls for us as human resource professionals to rethink on our approaches. So solutions to the modern business challenges would be to prepare the human resource practitioner, not just to prepare the human resource practitioner, but to equip the human resource practitioner with the best tool, with the best technique, with the best strategy. And that is what we call the result-based approach. The result-based approach is simply an approach that has to do with the results. This simply means that everything that we had been doing before perhaps had not been based on results. Maybe we had been engaged in activities just to please us, activities just to earn salaries, activities just to get benefits, activities just to get per diem and leave office, attend to our families, enjoy with our families from the large financial gains that we have obtained from these activities. We are being challenged tonight that the solutions to the challenges that we have just put bare is preparing ourselves as the human resource practitioners to adopt a result-based approach in performing the human resource programs, performing every initiative and every activity that is related to the human resources. That is very key, and that is part of the things that we want to unveil and we want to provide answers to in the human resource accounting class. Now, what will we focus on in our attempt to provide solutions to the modern business challenges that we have just talked about? What are we going to focus as human resource practitioners? Because actually, and indeed, we have to prepare ourselves. We have to equip ourselves with the right tools. But as we do this, we must focus on specifics. These are the thorny issues that will guide us in our attempt to revitalize and to change the way things have been working, to put things, to give it a new twist. We must focus on partnership relationship in business. This simply means that as human resource practitioners, we must now be business partners. Being a business partner simply means that you have to understand the culture of the business. You have to understand your business inside and out. That organization you work for, if it is a service industry, you must understand it in and out. What I mean is, you must know who your customers are. You must know what kind of services you provide. Actually, you must be engaged and actively involved in the provision of these services. This is not the time when you need to sit in the office and wait for a recruitment exercise. This is not the time you need only to wait for a selection or interviewing of new employees. This is not the time. You need to only manage payroll, and it is neither the time that you only need to be administrative or rather a paper pusher, because actually this is a boring activity that as the human resource has entangled himself or herself for a very long time. And that is what I said, there is need for us to change. There is a paradigm shift in the way things have always been done. So we must focus on partnership relationship. We must have very good knowledge of the companies we work for. Actually, I've realized that most of the human resource practitioners do not really have a better knowledge of the companies they work for. Maybe because they assume that to be a human resource professional, your responsibility must be confined within the walls of the human resource office. You must only be engaging with employees, maybe whenever they are in disciplined cases, you are supposed to handle grievances. Wherever we are approaching new month, you are supposed to sit there, do payroll, process NHIF, and make sure that people are paid. But one thing that you have forgotten is you are beyond this. You deserve to be in the boardroom. You deserve to be offered a seat at the table where negotiations take place, where strategies are being laid, where people brainstorm on the possible solutions to the problems that the organizations are facing. So by that, I mean, you must be a business partner. As human resource professionals, we must be a business partners. So that is one thing that we have to focus on, even as we try to break down these elephants. Now, we also have to strategically focus on a different approach as opposed to what we used to focus on. Actually, traditionally, we used to be paper pushers, like I said before. We used to be personnel administrators. We used to be administrators who are charged with playing the basics, the basic human resource functions that has to do with recruitment, that has to do with selection, that has to do with placement of employees on their responsibilities. That is, and this is not the time for us to do that. We must give it a new approach. We must move from the technical approach to the strategic approach. So apart from being business partners, we must be strategic. We must be strategic. So the first two would qualify us to be strategic business partners. That is going to be our focus, even as we try to explore what makes or what are the fundamentals of human resource accounting. Accountability and credibility are things that we cannot leave behind when we want to really focus on the result-based approach. We must be accountable at work. We must be credible people, people with integrity, people who put ethics, work ethics before everything else, people who identify with activities that they have been obligated to perform and ensure that all the resources that have been put at their disposal, they can account for them from the first to the last. So accountability is another area that as human resource practitioners who really wish to deal with the business challenges that we experience in the modern world must focus on. We must be credible, we must be accountable, we must be transparent, apart from being business partners and besides being strategic and not technical. Now, we also have to demonstrate our contribution to the organization. Remember, this is something that maybe might have happened in your organization. There are specific departments in organizations that I know are given priority when it comes to allocation of resources, when it comes to presenting their views on the boardrooms, presenting their views during important meetings that shape the future and the direction of the organization. They are the finance department, for example. Finance is regarded highly in organizations because it is believed to be the center that controls the revenues, the center that controls the cost, and therefore will be able to track all the expenses of the organization. Not taking into account that without the human resource, the finance department will really not exist, because actually even the people who are at the helm of this department are human resources. So you cannot talk of anything within the organization without mentioning human resources. So we are this important. We are this important. But how else can we show that we are this important? So our focus in human resource accounting will be to demonstrate on the contribution that we can afford to the organization. In other words, we will be asking ourselves, is there really something that we can afford to the organization in terms of the returns of investment? If we can quantify what we can do, can we really sit down and quantify and say, this year, this is what we are bringing on the table. There is something that is a challenge to us, and it is something that human resource accounting will help us to fathom, will help us to understand. And from this, we'll be able to know the various ways that we can really employ to ensure that we demonstrate our contribution to the organization's bottom line, and also to argue our case wherever people are surrounding the table to reshape and to give the organization the direction. We can also have a word to put forward and to count at the end of the day. So that, again, is going to be our focus tonight. Now, what tools should we equip ourselves with? What tools exactly should we equip ourselves with? There is the human resource accounting, a very important tool that is going to aid us to break down all these problems that we are talking about. We've got human resource metrics. Metrics is a new phenomenon and is a new development in the field of human resources. And human resource metrics simply comes into the picture or come into existence because of the need for the human resources to not only be technical, but to be strategic business partners. And because we are strategic business partners, we need to use numbers. We need to use numbers to argue our case. We need to use numbers to present some of the cases that we have. And that is what we'll call for our need to understand the human resource metrics. We need to know, for example, we need to quantify, for example, the number of people who get separated with the organizations and for what reasons they separate with the organization. We really need to quantify the number of absenteeism and give it reasons as to why we maybe experience numerous absenteeisms within the organizations or the departments. We really need to quantify the number of low engagements and high engagements, and be able to identify some of the reasons as to what or what leads to this, low engagements and so on and so forth. So this is something that not any one single human resource practitioner should think to miss out. It's very important. Human resource metrics and human resource analytics, every training that we do attend of late, be it a webinar, be it a conference, human resource metrics, human resource analytics have always been the issue. They have always been the issue, and we will never cease to mention them. We'll never cease to talk about them because they really play a very important role in the human resource. They really contribute to our responsibilities at our workplace, and they help us to understand some of the phenomenon that we would otherwise not be able to make people to understand if we were to use illustrations. But the figures are very important because figures never lie. They have never lied and they will never lie. So that's another tool that we will be using. So this, in a nutshell, are the tools. They are the techniques that we are going to use throughout to help us be better people, to help us demonstrate our contribution, to help us devise ways in which we can become, strategic business partners, and apart from that, be accountable and credible with the resources that we have been obligated to have. Now it's the time for us to get to the fundamentals of human resource accounting. Fundamentals of human resource accounting simply has to do with the understanding of what human resource accounting is. What really is human resource accounting? That is one thing that we have to understand. This unit or subject is a unit that many human resource professionals have for a very long time detested. I don't know why people hate it or have hated it. Maybe because of the last terminology, that is the accounting, because wherever accounting is mentioned, people do associate it with figures. People do associate it with mathematics. And the mathematics, as we all know, is not really a friendly unit to most of us because of the attitude that we have developed around it. But one thing that I want to assure you is that human resource accounting is a different baby. It is a different baby that wails less often. So we are going to realize that this is the real deal. This is the real deal that is going to enable us to achieve all that we have talked about previously. This is the real deal that is going to help us provide instant solutions to the challenges that the business is going through. So we need to define it. But before we define human resource accounting, I want us to think of one thing. Accounting generally is a process. Accounting is a process, and it is a process that normally begins from identification. In other words, in the organization, you have to identify. You have to identify that which you want to account for. If it is the financial accounting world, you really need to identify transactions. After identifying these transactions, you're supposed to go ahead and record them down. You're supposed to go ahead and journalize them. That is the accounting terminology that they do use. After you have journalized it, you'll be required to summarize. You're summarizing so that you can present it in a useful format, which will make sense. After you have done that, you are then required to analyze. You analyze, you interpret. Your intent as you interpret is to generate information. This information, remember, it is needed by management. It is needed by the stakeholders. It is needed by everybody who could be having interest in the organization. Why? To make better and informed decisions. So when you talk about human resource accounting, it is no different. It is like any accounting concept. The only difference is that as other accounting concepts account for finances, here we will be concentrated on the activities, initiatives, and programs that surround the human resources. This is what we want to account for. So when you talk about human resource accounting, we want to look at this process that begins by identifying the human resource activities. We want to look at this subject that looks at recording of these human resource activities. After we have identified human resource activities within the organization, then we have to record them. We have to journalize them. We have to summarize them. We have to analyze them. We have to interpret. And actually, we have to report them. So that is what human resource accounting is all about. So in a nutshell, the first definition of human resource accounting is simply the process of identifying, the process of recording, the process of summarizing, the process of analyzing, and the process of interpreting, and then finally reporting. What do we report? The investments made on people in an organization. That is why I've given it an highlight so that some emphasis can be put on it. Investments made on people in an organization. That is what interests us. So we want to identify these investments. We want to record this investment. We want to summarize it so that it can make sense to us. We want to analyze it. We want to interpret it and then generate this information that we will later on report. So we will be reporting investments made on people in the organization that have never been taken into account by the conventional accounting practices. And when you talk about the conventional accounting practices, we are simply referring to financial accounting. We are simply referring to management accounting. We are simply referring to taxation. We are simply referring to auditing. All these accounting practices have failed in one way or the other. In other words, there are some aspects of investments that they have failed to take into account. And there is what human resource accounting is trying to address. So human resource accounting is coming in handy to identify these practices, identify these investments, identify these initiatives and these programs that other accounting practices have never taken into account. And that is the first fundamental of human resource accounting that we will be trying to break down. So just get to note that it is concerned about the investment we are making on people. Remember, people are the most important assets in an organization. So we want to look at people. We want to really consider if in any case there could be investment that we are making on people. How do we invest on people, for example? We could invest on you by paying you salary. We could invest in you by developing your capacity, enhancing your productive capacity through training. We can invest in you through talent development. We can invest in you by paying you bonuses, paying you benefits, and so on and so forth. These are the things we want to identify within the organization. They are the things that Other aspects of accounting are failed to take into account because of one reason or the other. And so we must make sure that wherever we are reporting profits, then this profits that we are reporting holistically take into account everything, so that the figures that we normally give at the end of the day are a true reflection of what happens in the organization. So that is very, very critical. The other things, our definitions or fundamentals that we can talk about with regards to human resource accounting is that it involves the investments the organization makes on its people and how their values change over a period of time. It's a fact that we cannot deny that organizations on everyday basis invest on human resources. Our organizations we work for, they invest on people, they invest on employees. So what we want to come up with is quantify this investment. We want to quantify this investment and then go ahead and try to determine or find out how the values of this investment, of these resources, of these people do change over a period of time. That is one fundamental of human resource that we will tend to look at. Human resource accounting is also a measurement. You cannot actually quantify a thing without measuring it. That is why it is needful for us to also look at it in that perspective, that human resource accounting is the measurement and reporting of the cost and value of people in an organization. We want to report the costs. The costs here are the investments. We want to also report the value of the people. And when you talk about the value of people, this really has to do with the returns. When we invest on you, we expect that this investment will not go in vain. By investing on you, we expect to get some benefits out of it. These benefits constitute your value. So HR accounting will not only be concerned or will not only focus on the investment that we make on you, but will also be focusing on the value that we expect from this investment. Like any other business activity, I believe we are business people. We are engaged in business. That is our side hustles. We have businesses as side hustles. There would be no any one individual that would dare engage in a business and continue in the business if the business were not giving any profit, if the business were not giving any returns. In other words, at the end of the day, if there is this mama whom you have assigned to be helping you at the shop or be helping you at your organization or wherever it is, you will sit down with her, you will sit down with him and try to put them to task to account for the daily transactions. Your aim is to know the progress. So you have invested heavily in this business and you do not want your investment to go in vain. You really want your investment to give you some returns. So this is what HR accounting is trying to break down. Human resource accounting measures the cost, measures the investment, and also try to ascertain the investment returns that is associated with this investment. That is human resource accounting for us. That is human resource accounting for you and I. Now, with regards to costs, we really want to come up with a standard way of measuring the investments. So we'll be undertaking measurements throughout this process. In other words, there is a time when we'll be talking about measurements. There is a time when we'll be talking about evaluation, so that we'll be able to quantify every aspect that we have been talking about here. So what objectives do we tend to achieve by undertaking this study? What objectives will human resource accounting attempt to achieve? So it is going to enable organizations to make better informed decisions. Information is power. When used properly, it can impact positively on the organization in general. And they do say that information is power. Knowledge is power. So if we are able to come up with the right information, report this information at the right time, that this is going to transform our organizations. That is going to give us a position that not any other organization with whom we are operating in the same sector will try to match. So accounting, human resource accounting to be precise, will enable us to generate a pool of information. Remember the processes that we are talking about when we were looking at the fundamentals of HR accounting. With the first definition, we've talked about the various processes. So it is a research-oriented unit. It is a research-oriented subject. In other words, as human resource practitioners, we must do research. Research has to do with our engagements with various research methods. You will be looking at surveys. You'll be looking at focus groups. You'll be looking at use of questionnaires. You'll be looking at observations. You'll be looking at all aspects of research, how you can better use research to help your organization to sort out the problems. So that, at the end of it, will help us generate a pool of information. A pool of information that will help the management to make better informed decisions. That is why we ended it by saying that reporting the investments. After you have gone through all these processes, your final stage must be reporting the investments. And this happens only after you have interpreted and got that information, because it is actually the information that we must report. And not any other information. It must be accurate information. It must be a better information. And the only way we will achieve this is through human resource accounting. Remember, it is research work. HR accounting, through research, we will be able to generate this information that will help the CEOs, will help the management to make better and informed decisions. HR planning, something again that cannot be despised. Something again that cannot be put at the periphery, because it plays a significant role in the organization. We need to plan. We need to plan with the stakeholders. The stakeholders need to plan. So HR accounting will enable us to do with this. Succession planning, that is something that we have to take into account. We need to be prepared to prepare people who will occupy our positions when we leave. We should not take the organization by surprise. We should not push them to a corner where they will not have a choice but to bring in anybody, but to bring in any Tom, Dick, and Harry to occupy this position when it feels vacant. So we have to start working on it right away. So HR planning is another benefit. That is another takeaway that human resource accounting will help us with. Accountability. This is something that we will never get tired mentioning. Accountability in the human resource, how we use it, is something that is very key. You have been charged, you have been obligated with some duty at your workstation. Are you able to account for these resources? Can you tell us what contribution, what results you are getting? This is another area that human resource accounting will help us to address. Manpower utilization. How do we utilize our manpower? How do we utilize our human resources within the stations that we are working? Do we use them, utilize them efficiently? Do we get the most out of the human resources? For us to be able to understand this, human resources accounting is coming in handy to help us understand this. That the only way we are going to ensure effective manpower utilization is through human resource accounting. How will you get the best out of that employee? There are some cases where employees do get disengaged from their responsibilities. They just withdraw from that job. They just don't give it their whole. And when that happens, we don't get the most. There is no effective utilization of manpower. But by understanding or getting through human resource accounting, we will know exactly what we must put in place to enhance employee engagement. We will know exactly what we must put in place to ensure there is employee satisfaction and to ensure there is employee commitment. There is commitment to the responsibilities and there is utilization of the resources to their fullest. You also, by understanding or studying human resource accounting, you will prove a point. It will help you to prove a point. This is the point that every all the time. I know at one point you might have been asked by your boss, what is it that this program will benefit the organization with? These are questions that perhaps sometimes, in many cases, we fail to answer them because we don't have the right answers at our fingertips. We cannot lay plain what we can do. We cannot put it plain and straight what we can do to help the organization to come out of the situation that it is presently going through. And for us to answer this question, human resource accounting is going to help us do that through the result-based approach. Remember when we were starting, we said that human resource accounting simply present to us the need for a result-based approach, the need to change tact, the need to change the way we had been doing things. So one objective or another objective of human resource accounting is to help increase the managerial awareness of the human resource contribution within the organization. So how do the managers get to know what we contribute? How do they get to know that we are also an important department, that it is not just the finance department that plays a critical key role in the organization, but also the human resources? How do we earn this respect within the organization? Through human resource accounting, we are going to prove this point to the whole world, that our position is very key within the organizations. As we attempt to do all this, there are approaches that we must do. If you go hunting, for example, you expect to hunt down an antelope because you need game meat. There are approaches that you must embark on for you to be able to achieve this. You must use those approaches that will pin down the antelope, because the antelope is a very sensitive creature. Normally, their sense for hearing is very high. You drop a piece of anything on the ground or on the grass, they will detect it. They always eat, they always feed on the grass, but with their ears straight into the air, because it helps them to collect information within their surroundings, information about the approaching prey, information about the impending danger that could harm them. So this is not an exemption. We are not an exemption. We've talked about very many problems that surround our duties, the human resource function. And the only way we are going to come out of it and to ensure that we prove those points we have talked about, that we have looked at under objectives of human resource accounting, is by considering these approaches. The first approach is the cost-based approach. The second approach being the value-based approach. Now, how do we understand these approaches? These approaches have actually been drawn from the very definitions that we have given out. Remember, there is one definition that was saying HR is the measurement of the investments, the expenditures that we incur, as well as the value. So meaning, on one hand, we have the expenditures, on the other hand, we have the value. So if we break down this into two, then it will align perfectly with these two approaches. There is this approach that will only be focusing on the expenditure. Yet there is another approach, the second approach, that will be focusing on the values that we anticipate out of this investment. These are the approaches that we are going to use when it comes to measuring the human resource accounting. These are again are the approaches that every human resource practitioner or professional who anticipates to prove a point to the employer, to prove a point to the manager, to prove a point by measuring his contribution, by measuring her contribution, must employ. In your attempt in demonstrating your contribution, you must employ the dual approaches. That is the cost-based approach as well as the value-based approach. That begs the question, what is cost-based approach? What is cost-based approach? Like I've said, cost-based approach is an approach that is related to the costs. When I talk about costs, what should come to your mind are the expenses, the expenditure that we have to incur as a result of maintaining the human resources. By having you as our employee, by having you as our staff, what costs must we incur? That is what we are talking about, the cost-based approach. So we must really look at it as an approach that focuses heavily on the organization's expenditure on the human resource activities. Every year we undertake training programs. Every year we do selection, we do recruitment. Every year we pay salaries. Actually, every month we pay salaries. We pay benefits. So if you can congregate all these expenses, all these expenditures, then you will be using a cost-based approach to help you do that. In other words, your understanding and your attention is drawn to all the expenditure that we have to incur as a result of undertaking the human resource activities. So your role as a human resource professional is to be able to have the ability to identify which one is the human resource activity and which one is not a human resource activity. Because if you bring in, incorrect costs, if you bring in costs that are not associated with the human resource activities, then the information you are going to generate would not be an accurate information. And then it means what you'll be reporting to the management will not help them to make better informed decisions. So that is why under cost-based approach, we will only be focusing on the human resource related activities and the expenditures that are normally associated with them. So these activities could be things like recruitment, talk of selection, talk of training development, talk of human resource maintenance, talk of replacement of human resource, among others. The list is endless. We cannot exhaust all of it. So this takes us to the different classes of HR costs. HR costs can then be classified into three. We have got acquisition HR costs, we have got maintenance HR costs, and we have got learning and development costs. It is always important that the moment we bring in an employee, we get ready to maintain this employee. So it's not enough to bring in an employee, but it is also important that after we have brought in the employee, we have to maintain this employee by paying the employee good salaries. Actually, when you want to maintain this person, when you want to increase the level of engagement, when you want to increase the level of job satisfaction within the organization, I'm not really saying that employee engagement has to be enhanced by good paycheck. No, I'm only saying that it is one of the contributors that really enhances it. So we must make sure that we maintain employees by paying salaries, by paying benefits, by meeting all their expenses, because they also have bills to take care of. So that takes us to the second class of HR costs, that is maintenance cost. Then the last one is the learning and development. Sometimes we bring in employees who are not well equipped for the job. They need to be retrained. They need to be taken through the job. They need to be equipped with the right skills that are needed for the job. Something that they could be lacking, something that they could be missing. So these, we have to incur costs related to that, because we'll be conducting orientations, we'll be taking them through trainings, rigorous trainings, and we'll be having trainers, we'll be having expenses related to the training, and so on and so forth. So that would translate to learning and development costs. So when you put all this together, amongst other costs that we'll be talking about in due course, then that is what will give us, or will translate to, the cost-based approach. So as we attempt to measure human resource contribution, that is one area that we will be measuring, the costs associated with the investments that we make on the human resources. Then comes the value-based approach. Like like the name suggests, value is related to the merits. By investing, what is the merit that we tend to gain from these investments? So when you talk about value-based approach in measuring our contribution as human resources, we want to focus on the benefits that we can afford organization. In other words, can you ask yourself, what is it that I can contribute to the organization? organization has played a key role. It has invested heavily on you. It has allocated resources to your department. Then the rest that you need to do is to ask yourself, what is it now that you can afford to this organization as a result of these good investments? By allocating you these training resources, by allocating you these resources for new hire and so on and so forth, what is it that you can give back? This will be well taken care of by the value-based approach, which particularly focuses on the benefits that we will afford the organization by taking the various human resource activities. So the economic benefits will be best measured by using some HR metrics, such as the return on investment. You want to look at revenue per employee. You want to look at the number of absenteeism, the rate of absenteeism. You want to look at the turnover, right? And in every attempt, we must make sure that all these figures work in favor of the organization. So that would be another approach that we will use to help us understand the human resource accounting. Now, our next class will focus on topic 1. We'll focus on topic 1, that is the need for a result-based approach. The need for a results-based approach. That will be our topic 1. So in our next class, that is what we will focus on. I want us to stop there, but before we stop, there is always a room for questions. If you have any issue with regards to our discussion so far that you feel I need to respond to, or you need to share with the class, then I will give each one of you some few minutes to do that. You can have some questions, you ask them before we can break. Yes? Yes, Winnie? Winnie, if you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. All well.
Thank you so much. Do you have any question before we adjourn the class?
Not from my end.
All right, thank you so much. You know, we'll have them coming as time goes by. Judith, if you can hear me.
I can hear you, Mwalimu.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I don't have any question for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Judith. We have Abdishakur. Abdishakur, if you can hear me. Abdishakur, if you can hear me. It seems Abdishakur is away. He's far from with us. Now let's have Lillian. Unmute.
Sorry for that. I don't have any question.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lillian. Meto, if you can hear me.
Yes, Mwalimu, I can hear you.
Yes, go ahead, please. If you have any question.
I do not have a question, but just to thank you because of this introduction. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Meto. So guys, I want to thank you so much for making it to class. I believe next time we'll have a good time as we focus on topic 1, that is the need for a results-based approach. Just take note that majority of the concepts that I've highlighted already will also come into the picture. They will again resurface. So never be taken aback wherever they come back to us in this topic. So thank you so much. Do have a good night. Bye-bye.
You too, bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, good night.